On this video I will show how I built a new shoe stand to replace this old pretty flimsy one from Ikea, which was actually in this house when I bought it, so I never actually bought it myself. It was here when I moved in. So as you can see, it started to be at the end of its life anyway. I think it's only a matter of years before it would have collapsed on me, so it was time to do something new. And for this one I decided to use red oak, which is a wood species I have actually never used before, so it's always interesting to see if it operates somehow differently than, for example, walnut and maple that I've been using more, and ash as well. So let's see how it goes. Something else I have never done before is to actually use an application to design the piece that I'm about to build. So I've been mainly following plans by other builders or following YouTube videos and taking ideas from that. But this was the first one I actually used Fusion for, and I'm very bad in using Fusion. It took me ages to create this design on it. It's a bit of a learning curve with those applications, but I'm fairly happy how the plan worked out, and it really helped when starting with the build to actually have this plan, because as mentioned I usually follow others or then I just wing it if it's my own design. So I will surely keep learning more and more how to use Fusion, because it really helps. So what you have seen me doing so far is that I milled the wood and then I started cutting these pieces that will make up the end sections of the shoe stands. And the way I decided to build this is to make two of them, because I didn't want to create one 3 meter long, very long piece that would be extremely hard to move over in my small shop. So I decided to build this in two sections, and I will just put them next to each other once I'm done with them. While finishing doing the roundovers, the next one you will see is where I actually start to use my spacer blocks to figure out where I will actually place those individual pieces, and then I will mark for the domino, which is the only joint I will be using throughout this project. So everything you see me doing here will be done with glue and dominoes, because especially with this kind of furniture I think it's the easiest and quickest way to manage what I want to do. As I'm still very new in building furniture, I don't consider myself a proper woodworker yet. Now that I designed this piece myself, I did find out during the build that the order of operations is not always so easy than you might actually think. It's fairly easy to build furniture when you follow someone else's plans who have figured out the best way and the best order to build things, and I think I was actually struggling with, even though it's a simple one, but I was still struggling occasionally in probably doing things in the wrong order, like when should I add the roundover, should I do it before or after the glue up and all that kind of stuff. So I ended up struggling with this build more than I thought, but then again I think I learned a lot while doing it, because for the next time I will be focusing much more on the proper order, how I should do things, but I guess it's natural, you learn only by doing. One such example can be seen here with the roundovers, because I did the roundovers before the glue up and I wasn't exactly sure on the lines where I need to stop making them, so I left way too big of a buffer, which basically meant that I needed to redo the roundovers after the glue up. So things like this happened throughout the build, mainly because I just didn't have the order of operations completely figured out, but it's not bad, but it was just slightly annoying occasionally. But I have to say, once I was finally done with this, the feeling of accomplishment was pretty big for me, because being able to plan this in Fusion and actually execute according to the plan and make them into usable, pretty good looking pieces of furniture, I felt very good once I got them to my house. Now, to make the build a bit easier, every single piece that I'm using here for the end sections and now for the longer pieces as well are of the same measurements, which was roughly 4.5 centimeters or 1.8 inches. So every single piece is following the same measurement to make joinery and everything easy. So That was kind of my design choice, which I was quite happy about while building it. So when I was done with cutting all the pieces I needed, it was time to do the first actual dry fit. And as you can soon see from the video, I did have some issues with it. It was actually a bit of a task to get 6 of these bars attached to each other without any glue. So I ended up having this fall over on me probably 5 to 10 times before actually making it happen. So it was not the easiest one, but I made it. Everything fit very well during the dry fitting, which I kind of was expecting as well, because I was using the wider setting on the domino, which made me able to actually fine-tune and tweak the positioning a bit, which I obviously did while doing the actual glue up, but still think it's worthwhile to do a dry fit before going with the glue up. And before gluing up everything, I decided to add the round over before, because it's always easier to do it at this phase than try to get your router into small kind of corners after the glue up. So I guess it depends. Sometimes it makes more sense to do it afterwards, sometimes before. Here I think I made the right decision to actually do the round over to these longer bars before the glue up. Then it was time to start making the panels, and the way I designed these actually requires me to do 6 panels overall. So everything you see me doing here, I needed to do 6 times due to having to make 6 panels, and I only had clamps for making one at a time. So basically it was always 1 day per panel, so it took me almost a week to just make these 6 panels. One of the things I have learned by watching more seasoned and more professional woodworkers is to use the in and out method when making panels, and I use that technique every single time. So basically on your jointer you joint them in a way that you have one of the sides facing in and the opposing sides you will joint by having it turned other way around. So if there's any issues with your jointer, you will end up actually in a perfect panel because they kind of complement each other. So very simple technique which I use every single time. I'm sure most of you have seen many videos of people building panels and doing the glue ups, so I won't bore you with too much footage doing exactly that. But as mentioned, I needed to do 6 of these. I could only do 1 per day. So calendar time, it took roughly 1 week to finish making these panels before I could actually continue with other tasks. And of course there always needs to be 1 or 2 mistakes for every build. I had my fair share of them with this one as well. Here you can see one where I actually went over with my router when I did the round over. So then I needed to figure out how to fix that one. Before going and showing how I fixed this little gap, there were some holes in the panels which I wanted to fix, and I decided to use this very easy to use epoxy putty where you just mix the 2 ingredients together and then you apply it. So very easy to fix any knot holes or small issues with this one. And these were on parts which are not even really visible in the finalized piece, so I didn't even need to do this fix, but I think it's nice to make sure that everything is without any holes or anything, even though you cannot see them in the end result. Here you can see me fixing the more visible issue which was caused by my mistake with the router. So I decided to use a plug cutter and then try to match the grain with the part where I will glue the plug in. It didn't turn out perfectly, but it was still good enough. And there were a few other sections where I actually did the same fix in the very same method, so just repeated a few more times, but it's fairly good in the finalized piece. So of course you can see them, but only if you really look for them. So normal eye probably wouldn't even spot them, even though they are fairly visible. Then I found out another issue with this kind of weird crack on one of the corners. But this was very easy to fix because nothing had actually split off, everything was still there. So I could have used wood glue, but I didn't want to wait, so for this one I just decided to go the quick route, put some CA glue on, use tape as clamp basically, and then spray with the activator, so this fix was done in like a minute or so. Now at this phase I decided to do the first sanding with 80 grit, and I always use the pencil method, so it's very easy, especially with this kind of piece of furniture where you have a lot of different sides and corners to sand. So at least for me, if I didn't mark every area with a pencil, I would probably miss few sections here and there. So for me, this is the only way to make sure that I will actually sand every single part of it. Now this is probably an overkill because these are very sturdy pieces of furniture already, but knowing my daughter that she will be jumping on top of these even though they are shoe stands, I decided to add these extra pieces of support for the top panel where she will be basically standing and dancing and jumping around. So nothing really special here, but just decided to go with pocket holes because these will not be visible anyway. So I added 2 of these supporting pieces to both of my pieces of furniture to make sure that they will hold. And personally I weigh about 100 kilos. I jumped on these once they were done, so no issues, they will hold very nicely for years to come. This was an easy one, so just using pocket hole screws, and I was done with adding these extra support pieces that I probably didn't even need to do. After this one I was ready to start working with the panels, so I first gave them a quick sanding with my Rotex to remove all the extra glue and all the other dents that might be there. And then I cut them to their final length, so because I always keep my panels and other parts slightly over length before I do the final cut to the final dimensions at the very late phase. I think it's the best practice because then you will always have the possibility to do the final adjustments and tweaks to make sure that all the bits and pieces fit perfectly with each other. Now, because of the way I did the frames and the glue ups, I need to cut the corners of these panels to make sure that they actually fit to the structure. And then I also need to cut these first in half to kind of put them in one side first and then the other. And then I decided to use pocket holes to join them back together. So it's not the perfect solution, and obviously the line will be visible in the end result, but then again it is a shoe stand and those lines that are there are basically invisible. So again, doing things in slightly different order and making these panels, sliding them in, and then maybe doing the glue up for the final end of the structure would have led me to not have to cut this in half, but this was a choice I actually made earlier in the project, and I am still fairly happy with the decision. The gap or line is almost invisible in the finalized piece, and again, the customer being me, I'm not complaining to myself about this. Then when it comes to the panels, I decided not to glue them in, so I'm using Z-clips to get them in and leave the possibility for wood movement. In Finland we have 4 very different seasons during the year. Wood will move, the moisture level will be different, so this will make sure that there will be plenty of possibilities for the wood to move according to the weather. And to the corners I also left quite a big gap actually to make sure that the wood will have somewhere to move, so this was the decision. And here we'll also see how my setup looked like when I was actually trying to attach the panels with the Z-clips and film it at the same time from this very small gap. So I need to be creative sometimes how I do these. With those panels in place, it was time for doing all the final sanding that needs to be done, and I have fairly similar process every single time. So I always start with 80 grit, then I go normally to 100, 120, 150, And before the final sanding, I always give them spray of water. For those ones who don't know, this will just make sure that the grain is lifted up, and then you do the final sanding to get the final layer very, very smooth and ready for the finish. So I usually stop at 180, and then my go-to finish is Rubio Monocoat, which was the one I chose here as well. It will be interesting to see how it will hold, because these will be getting some snow and ice and water on them. So let's see in a few years if they are still holding or not. I've never used Rubio with this kind of furniture that actually gets a lot of moisture to it. Nothing special in the way I did this, so I started from the bottom, and once I was done with that, I flipped these over, and then I added the finish on the panels themselves. And as always with Rubio, you let it be there for 5 to 10 or 15 minutes and then wipe off everything you can. And as I'm not a full-time woodworker, this is still a hobby for me. The clock was around 1 o'clock in the night time when I was actually doing this piece here, so getting the finish off. I got it finished, I was actually very happy. The next day I came back and picked up the pieces, and here you will see how they actually look like in my house with all the shoes on it. So I'm actually very happy with the end result, and I'm sure these will be holding here for many, many years to come. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and as always, if you liked it, please subscribe and like the video.